Hey animators, so let's talk about FootRoll. FootRoll, if you're not familiar with it, most people aren't going to be obviously, is this control, this usually single attribute on a foot controller that allows you to kind of bring the foot back on its heel like that, or in a negative, or in positive in this case, it'll bring it up on the ball of the foot like the back foot is here. It's a great handy attribute to have. It's pretty much a standard in every rig really for arcade feet, particularly for things like walks and runs. It's really useful. There are some challenges with working with it though. First one is transitioning into that pose and then transitioning out of it on the front foot and the back foot. So I'm going to talk about these separately. I've actually animated the foot coming into this contact pose, and this one then will be the down or the squash pose. I've got two versions of that basically. I've got the first one here with the blue controller here, the left foot, and then I've got the red controller here, the right foot is doing the same transition. So the poses are pretty much mirrored, but they're animated a different way. If you look at this one, you'll notice that the control is in line here with the foot, and the control itself is rotating to bring the foot flat down on the floor, whereas this control is always flat on the floor and the FootRoll is bringing the foot down. The thing we deal with a lot with walks, particularly slow kind of naturalistic looking walks, are knee pops. You tend to get more of that when you use a FootRoll control. It's kind of like a symptom of it, or a side effect if you like. If I show the last frame here, which is the same as the first frame, because I'm using the FootRoll on this one here, it has to transition to that. On this pose here, with something that people call the up or the peak pose, there's a transition here between being halfway sort of between what the foot is doing and what the ground, where it's heading. So you've actually got a little bit of rotation, a little bit of FootRoll there, and then here you've got no rotation on the controller, it's flat on the ground, but you've got the full FootRoll that I'm going to use for this pose. So it's kind of a weird transition there, and you'll notice that the knee, it's not doing too much, it's kind of just popping back there, it's not actually unpleasant, but the leg is stretching quite a bit, which may or may not be what you want. The other side of it then is at the beginning of the walk, you have this in-between pose here where you've got a little bit of FootRoll still on and then none here, it's zeroed out on this pose. So you notice the knee is kind of doing a fairly big pop forward there as that happens, and then it kind of ends up in its position there, and then carries on going back into the passing pose and so on. But if you look at this one, it's a little bit cleaner. You've got like kind of the knee travels backwards. In fact, it's continually traveling backwards from about frame 8 here, in fact from frame 7 even, and then it kind of sticks in space for a second, which is okay. Our legs kind of do actually do that if you look at them in reference, and then it there's a bit of a pop there. You can maybe fix that with a little bit of finessing, but it's not too bad. So I would argue that this leg is actually animating better. It actually looks better. So what can we do? Well, one thing we could do, you could animate this leg the same way as that one, or if you prefer using FootRoll, I'm going to select, say, a little bit of the geometry here. I'm going to run my ghost tool so that we can compare the poses, and I'm going to ghost that, and then I'm going to go and basically I want to keep the knee where it is for there, because that's what happens kind of here. If you look at that, the knee kind of comes back a little bit, and then there's a little bit of pop forward, and then kind of sticks. So that's not not perfect. It could be cleaned up maybe a little bit, but it's certainly better than this, where it's a big jump and then a big jump back. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this, depending on your rig. Some rigs may have like a leg scale attribute, but what I'm actually going to use, this one has a nice control here on the knee itself. You can actually move the knee, which is kind of a handy way to fix this stuff. So what I do is I'm going to key it on the first frame, and then I'm going to just grab it on the second frame and move it back, and then the same thing on the third frame, move it back a little bit. I don't want it to come back totally. I do want to get the knee coming, bending a little bit, and then maybe on frame 4 I'm just going to zero it out. And that's it. I'm going to key it as well on the last frame, just to make sure that it stays where it is for the rest of the animation. If I was to play blast that now, it's fairly clean. Whereas if I go back and actually just to show you, if I take those keys out and play blast again, I don't know if you're going to see that in the screen capture. I don't know if it's going to have enough frame rate to see it, but I can see a fairly obvious knee pop now on that one. Okay, that's the contact to passing pose. You've also got the FootRoll being used here at the back pose though as well. And in this case, I find the transition works quite nicely. Like going from here with the foot flat on the floor. I'm starting to look at the blue controller now. There's a tiny bit of FootRoll now, and then there's a bit more. I actually find that's quite a nice controllable way to get from flat on the floor to a nice back pose like that. The foot roll works really well there. The problem that I sometimes run into though with foot roll is, again, a similar thing to the front leg, going from that pose into, say, this kind of pose, the passing pose. If it can be a little bit weird. If I just I've already fixed this problem with this example, so I'm a little bit ahead of where I'm actually going to show you. But if I just take this keyframe out here, you'll notice there's a kind of an ugly transition, and the knee is kind of doing a big spacing gap there, and the foot is kind of doing sort of a weird transition. Because again, I've got half of the foot. I could pull that back and sort of like that, but I'm still going to get some sort of weird interpolation there. So what I prefer to do is just get the foot roll out of there completely. And what I generally do is just ghost it again, and then go to this pose. If I build this pose again, go to this frame, and just zero the foot roll, and then just rotate it back, and then put the toe so that it's still kind of traveling backwards as he has been. So now I've gotten rid of the foot roll. Now I've got a much cleaner thing to work with. What you'll often run into with a foot roll is, if you watch what happens when I use the foot roll, the knee, as I rotate the foot back, the knee really gets affected an awful lot. Whereas if I go to, say, this pose here, where I've got no foot roll, I can just grab the foot controller and rotate it. If the rigger's done a good job, which he has in this case, the pivot point for the ankle is where the foot control is. The pivot for the foot controller is right on where the ankle bone would be, pretty much. And the IK handle is there. You'll notice as I rotate the leg from this control, it barely affects the knee at all, which is really what you want. Whereas if I use the foot roll, as soon as I start doing this, it's jiggling the knee all over the place, because it's changing where the IK handle is. If I start rotating now the rotation point is in a different place, and it's going to rotate the knee as well. So I hope that's useful, but it's just something that I often run into with walk cycles, is that those tricky transition ones, going from a contact to a down, or from the back contact to the passing, to the lift off pose. So I hope that helps. Cheers.